Hello, hello. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the B.E.A.M stream. B.E.A.M standing for Broadcast Examination of Art and Media. Thank you to all of you guys who are watching our streams religiously. It's good to be back. And also for the viewers who are turning in now for the first time. So thank you guys. Also to the people who are going to be joining us on countless rewatches. So I'm Leonard alongside Mo for today. We're going to be a duo covering Marvel Studios' first premiere episode of Loki. Lots to unpack here. And, we're just going to break it down. We're going to have a discussion. And, for you guys that are here live with us, please feel free to interact and comment on the stream. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with a quick recap of episode 1, Glorious Purpose, by Mo.
Hey everybody, what's going on? So first episode really sets the tone for where you think the show might go. It's really good. So just a quick recap. So we start off with the events that occurred in the 2012 Avengers movie, Attack on New York. Basically, this is taking place. We're getting a flashback to when the Avengers came to get the Tesseract in their little time escapade during the course of Endgame, and where Loki ended up actually after he took the Tesseract. So he takes the Tesseract, he ends up actually landing, thousands of miles away. Basically, and it was a quick bit escape. It was just like he went, grabbed the Tesseract to get out of Dodge. He lands at this location, I believe it was like Nepal. He gets to and please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. He gets there. The Time Variance Authority catches up to him and basically takes him into custody for breaking the timeline. He gets in through the TVA. He's completely disoriented as to what's going on. It's a very funny, interesting sort of system. It looks like an antiquated, office bureaucracy where they're getting him processed and they're basically getting him to sign off on everything that he's ever said, getting him actually, out of his armor and clothes into an orange jumpsuit. And getting him processed the same way you would, and actually if you were going to trial, they get him processed to basically go ahead and go to the next step because he's become a variant. In the meantime, we go over to Owen Wilson's character Mobius, who has they've encountered a situation in which one of the teams that went out to clear up a time variance arrive there. They basically find that the previous team had already been killed, and in their investigation of trying to figure out and catch up to who this killer is, this is obviously they established in the conversation that this person has killed other TVA time police before. They go ahead and actually they encounter this child. The child gives them some information, some inkling as to who was there. Whoever this assailant was left the child with some gum. They went ahead and realigned the time stream for that, but they're still investigating. And in the process of them sort of figuring out what occurred, Mobius gets information that says, hey, we actually have a Loki variant that's actually come into custody. So during his trial and his hearing, where Loki has presented with the charges that he has of, hey, you're being charged with this crime. He pleads, he tries to, show off and use his magic. Come to find out, magic is not available at the TVA. They are basically going to charge him with the crimes of, splintering the timeline, and therefore they're going to go ahead and actually probably execute him. Mobius steps in, tries to basically, plead his case to use him for his own investigation, which they agree to. They put him into Mobius's custody. Here we learn and we get to see sort of what the TVA does, what the TVA is all about. They show Loki basically a record of his greatest hits. The greatest hits actually show everything that's transpired between the beginning when we have obviously the Avengers movie, sorry, the first Thor movie, all the way through Avengers. Um, uh, in that interview, Loki does manage to escape. He gets to run around a little bit in the TVA. Finds actually that in the TVA they have actually he takes one of the clerks hostage. He goes actually to get the Tesseract so he can escape. Come to find out, the Tesseract is in a drawer with all these Infinity Stones because they're inconsequential to them. They're inconsequential pieces and items that are so powerful in one universe, they mean nothing to the TVA that watches the multiverse. Um, all that said, he then goes ahead and actually, and when he comes to this realization, he makes his way back over to to Mobius's office where he was being interrogated, and he gets to see a tape of how his life plays out. He gets to see the good, he gets to see the bad, and he gets to see his death, and it puts his life into perspective. Once he's discovered this, Mobius explains to him that hey, this your time. This is actually what it's how it's played out. There's no you're a cog, for lack of a better way of putting it, and a cog that is basically just made to prop up other people. Um, so he asked for Mobius asked for his help and says, hey, I need your help in trying to get this one particular variant. And when Loki asks, okay, he come to terms with his situation and his circumstance. He asks who this variant is. Come to find out, Mobius informs him that the variant that they're after is another variant of Loki. Cut to a scene where this variant sets up a trap for some more of the time cops, the Minutemen, and we end the episode with him getting a hold, him being the shadow assailant, with this tool that they use to realign the time stream. And that is episode 1.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I mean, geez. I mean, when I was actually reviewing it, second watch, and I was, doing my dictation notes and all that stuff. I got 20 minutes in, and I was like, wow, this is a lot of stuff here. It really is. But overall, I definitely enjoyed this episode. I thought it was pretty solid. I was having a conversation with a friend, and they asked about the writing in particular, and it was like, it's kind of wonky. I was like, well, yeah, that's what they're trying to convey. It is disjointed because you're at this place that's central to any point in time, really.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on at once, and so yeah, it's gonna feel like that. But yeah, let's start with Horace made a comment here about the first callback there, which I thought was pretty cool. Loki landing in the desert, and it reminds you of Iron Man.
Yeah.
And there are a few moments in the show that really, I recognize that, and it really hits home on there. So yeah, I had a great time enjoying and watching the show countless times, well, a couple of times. But yeah, what's your take, Mo?
I really like the show. I really think that Marvel so far has done a fantastic job, and we talked about this a little bit in the green room. They've done a fantastic job of diversifying and replicating the feeling of being a comic book fan and what it means when you are a comic book fan and you may like other genres, and that you can intersplice it, because comic books are like that. Comic books are, you can have a Marvel comic series where that focuses on a sort of a spy thriller, military industrial complex story, or you could have one that has magic and mysticism. You could have another story that incorporates super technology and things like that, and they all coalesce and live in the same universe. That's what the MCU is doing. And unlike, I think a lot of people have talked about for years now of fatigue. Marvel has done such an amazing job of being able to diversify the stories to make it where if you don't like the quote unquote superhero genre specifically, where you don't like capes and people flying around, there are other stories that are told that have other sensibilities, like the Twilight Zone for WandaVision, or like, something akin to a Doctor Who with Loki. So it has a lot of different elements of this that are very different than a lot of the sort of niche genres that become niche after a while, like the spaghetti western in the 60s and 70s, or the barbarian epic in the 80s. There's always this time frame where people are like, this is the hot thing. You get one success with one particular movie, and every studio wants to make that same exact movie, wants to replicate that. With Marvel, they've been able to say, okay, we know actually that this there's so much storytelling to tell, there's so much of a wealth of story, that you can go ahead and actually say, okay, well, we can go ahead and tell a story that has to do with this part of the universe, and it doesn't feel like it conflicts with the other part of it. You could still make it fit.
Right.
So overall, I mean, I think actually I feel like I personally, I just like I appreciate this show because of the component that it fits into all the other movies and shows.
Right. Darius, what you got? Oh, I think you're having audio issues. I think you're on mute, or maybe your microphone's not in. I'll give you a minute to take that to troubleshoot that. Oh, it's all right. It may not be working out, so yeah, we don't hear you, and you can keep troubleshooting until we do. But I guess until he does, I'm gonna just go back to that desert scene with Loki. Crash landing. That once again, that Stark reference there, but his immediate reaction when he sees other people is to get up on a rock and put himself above everyone else and dictate. He's burdened with glorious purpose,
right.
which is definitely one of my favorite lines in the MCU. But yeah, I mean, that scene was pretty fun and indication of, yes, that is the Loki that we know and love. We're going to see him. He's here all series, and there's no deviations from that. As far as this particular Loki Laufeyson is concerned, so I like how we get the raw Loki from the beginning, and then the TVA wastes no time. Literally in cleaning that situation up.
No pun intended. They waste no time. No pun intended.
No time. Or maybe it was intended. I don't know. But yeah, they waste no time in cleaning that up. And we're in for a wild ride. I mean, given that the whole entity of the TVA, and I'm going to get on my little soapbox here. I'm going to go ahead and start it off. I honestly, even though I like Agent Mobius and the TVA seems cool, I don't know. They may be the real villains of this show. Loki may be the hero of this show. It is his show, but he may turn out being the hero. Maybe that glorious purpose that he's been talking about is actually just putting the universe right. I say this because if you really look into what we've seen from the TVA so far, they don't mess around.
No.
As that poster said in the scene, they'll clean your clock, and they don't mess around. They're not called. Yeah, we got Agent Mobius, but the officers in the field, they're not called officers or peacekeepers. They're called hunters.
The Minutemen, that's right.
The Minutemen, they're called hunters. And if that's not an indication of what their purpose is out there, I don't know what is. And they weren't messing around. They yoinked Loki up, and they showed you what they were about.
Yeah. They really actually, and it's funny to me, the show itself. I think in every show, I love the writing that layers itself, and how basically every little thing, every little nugget, you can go ahead and say, okay, yeah, I can, you know, sort of put this on top of this, on top of this, on top of this, and
Hello.
it actually works.
Hello.
Oh,
Hey,
wait,
Darius, there you
we
are.
got audio on Darius. Welcome.
You can hear me?
We can,
We
yes.
can.
Okay.
Excellent.
Mic check 1 2 1 2. That's right.
Yeah. Go ahead and finish your thought. And then we'll
so basically, so what do we have with the interview, which I will say again, the interplay and the dynamic between Mobius and Loki is amazing. Their chemistry is fantastic. It is very much this, Loki is super, there's a lot of pompous and a lot of like, I am this person and all this other stuff. And Mobius is very much okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, it's your world, bro. It's your world. And it's very interesting to see that, because Loki obviously is used to having people either sort of combat and push back on him, and here's this guy who's basically like, hey, you tell me what's going on with you. I'm here to help you. And so the fact that the TVA exists as a form of control and order, and that they are basically there to make sure that you don't deviate from your path, and the fact that Loki in himself is a character that, by the admission of this first episode, is against that. He's basically 100% like, no, people his speeches, people think freedom is an illusion. I mean, or people think that freedom is something. Freedom is just an illusion. It's the freedom of choice is an illusion. So the fact that he makes this argument and then is confronted with the reality that he is just like, yeah, you're right. Freedom is an illusion. You don't have freedom. You are actually subjugated by time. You're subjugated by this. So you think you're making choices, and you want to go ahead and implement your will over others to create order. That's exactly what the TVA is doing. So it's having that actually, sort of put in there is really, it'll be really interesting to see how it fleshes out.
Right. We got to actually, we unfortunately had to skip, of course, your take earlier, Darius, because of the audio issues. But go ahead and interject in here, whatever you want. Actually,
I think you can't hear me, right?
Oh yeah,
we can hear you.
Thank God. I think when I think of looking at the show and how it initially plays out, he gets dropped from 1 bit to 1 bit to 1 bit to 1 bit. And I sat there talking, I was like, what do you do with a god of chaos and mischief? And he's literally mired in bureaucracy. And I was like, that is the most fitting thing I could think of that you could do to Loki. He has control. He's like, yep, number, next. And he sees the dude who didn't have his number. That was it. So it was like, oh, man, he's and like he can't do a darn thing. And watching this whole episode play out, it really, I'm glad we got to see Loki's inner psyche. And he's suffering justly because like initially, what do you do to a guy who's killed thousands in New York? And you seemingly give him a redemption arc. But the thing is, though, the guy looks up and, well, here's how you play it out. You got your mom killed. And you're like, what? It's, yeah, dude. You got your mom killed. Congratulations. This is what's going to happen. Like, well, what? Nope. Oh, yeah, that guy you were working for? Yeah, he's going to kill you, too. And you're screwed, dude.
Yeah.
And it breaks him. This is the one time Loki is actually broken. And it was just like it was done so amazingly well from beginning with the whole 60s, 70s cartoon style montage stuff
Yeah.
to them playing out, showing his life. It's so everything's so interwoven. And then I did like I like you guys the big reveal about the Infinity Gems. I think that's like something that both Marvel and DC have played with before. In fact, at one point there's a JLA comic, JLA versus Avengers, and basically all these objects are thrown around, and one of them is the Infinity Gauntlet, which winds up on Apocalypse. And Darkseid gets in, and it's like, what is this thing? Oh, that's the Infinity Gems. Oh, what does it do on Apocalypse? Oh, it doesn't work here. Get this out of here then. And so it was. See, I like that they've more or less are connecting these different concepts about reality versus time, or what I know DC called it hyper time. I can't remember what Marvel calls it, but it's they're pretty similar concepts.
Right.
But then yeah, so now there's this other thing that then we got to the ending. They said they were going to be seeing another Loki apparently, and during that, Marvel apparently referred to one fact about Loki that I have a funny feeling we're going to see something play with it. Loki is gender fluid.
Mm-hmm.
We may see a female Loki.
Well, going back to, I mean, just something as basic, and you hear me talk about stuff like this because I enjoy it. But let's talk about the show's branding in itself. From the beginning, there was a little bit of hate on Loki's logo. The disjointed, font, the various effects on it, and I've even seen fixes on the internet. Hey, this looks a lot cooler. However, if it directly ties into what they're trying to convey in the theme of the show, where hey, this is not one static thing. This thing is more than just what you think it is. It's there's variance, and so we will, certainly we should be able to see different iterations of this character or different variants of this character, because as you say, yes, they're introducing bureaucracy to Loki, the god of chaos, but maybe it's vice versa. They're introducing chaos into bureaucracy, and they're clearly having trouble with Loki in one form of another or another. So if he's the main antagonist there, and they have yet another Loki, it's going to get very interesting.
Yeah, and I think actually that they, to your point, Darius, I think that's there is some, it has been alluded to. There obviously been speculation about a particular actress that was cast and what her role would be in it. So we've got to. Everything has to be treated with a grain of salt, because if there's one thing Marvel has done, and I feel like they've done it very well, they become more and more effective at it, is that they throw out some red herrings. Sometimes it's things that are painfully obvious, like I think the most egregious example is obviously in WandaVision, with Agatha. That was the worst kept secret, in the sense of, like, I don't know that they were necessarily trying to hide it. This is who the character is. We tweaked the name a little bit, and people automatically went from there and splintered it into a million possibilities, when really, in reality, that what you saw was what you got. So I think actually Marvel has done a good job of keeping things close enough to the vest to say, hey, we'll give you actually some theories, and you can go ahead and run with it. This episode may have a couple of little Easter eggs and a couple of things here and there, like you said, like the gender fluid thing, which shows up in his file. There are things that are Easter eggs that they know people will pause and basically pick up on and theorize till the cows come home. and that generates interest. It generates clicks. That's the whole purpose of that, and in shows like this as well. But I will say again, I think we learned our lesson. At least I think a big majority of the fans learned their lesson from WandaVision, which was to not look so deep into it that you were just basically like, oh my God, it has to be this, and then lose enjoyment for the show just because your theory wasn't right. Perfect example. I think this is, in its own way, I don't think it was intentional, but I think it's hilarious that it happened this way. In that scene in the church with Mobius, the fact that the toy points to the devil, the first thing I said when I watched it with my family was, "It's Mephisto. There it is. We've solved it." And that honestly works out so well because, again, for the longest time during WandaVision, people were just like, "It's Mephisto. It's Mephisto." That's what the comic books are. So it is. It's an interesting thing what they're doing with the show, and I think the direction that they're going with, and especially with what Kevin Feige has said about it, that this is basically probably more so than the other two shows, the one that will really set the tone for the next couple of movies. I think with the obvious introduction of Kang into Ant-Man, and the multiverse movies that are taking place. Obviously, it's heavily rumored that Spider-Man is multiverse influence, that you have actually, obviously the multiverse of madness with Doctor Strange, that this is establishing the TVA as something that's a bigger threat than Thanos was, is crystallized 100% in that drawer scene. That drawer scene basically tells you think Thanos was bad. These people use those rocks for paperweights. He is nothing compared to the damage actually that time is. And the truth is, time makes a fool of us all. That's the reality, is that time actually, you can't fight the ravages of time. So I feel like this first episode does set the tone for what eventually, I know a lot of people have rumored and wanted Galactus, and I'm like, but Galactus is still just a universal threat. Thanos has done that. What about a multiversal threat?
Right. I agree with you on that drawer scene. And as you said, that's one of those pause moments. And I've seen screenshots online on that, and it points out a couple of things. A couple of people, but I didn't see any reference to what I think were cool elements in there. I believe there were a couple of variations of Tony Stark's arc reactor in there. It looked like batteries, the copper lacing around it, which arguably, to me, would be one of the most significant inventions in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, being that Iron Man was the first movie to kick it off, right? At least to us in our Atlanta ATL timeline, right? So yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool. But when Loki has that realization, when he sees the drawer and he looks at it, and he's processing what's in there, and the music changes, and he's all of a sudden just aware of everything that's going on around him, and he says, "Is this the greatest power in the universe?" That was a very cool, gripping moment, because to see this guy who puts himself above everybody, who thinks he's smarter than even Thanos himself, awestruck like a child. Very gripping moment there. I really felt that, and I really, that's one of the direction wise and writing wise, that's probably the greatest scene in this episode. That's the best scene, hands down.
Okay.
Hands down. Yeah.
Wow.
Let's go back to actually in my, I guess, the second favorite scene, going back to when the end of Loki's processing, when he's going to the, gets the ticket, the ticket scene, let's call it. that scene with the entire, I'll call it Max Fleischer-esque, this minute scene. That's something that definitely gripped me because, a lot I know for me, as far as animation is concerned, and we'll put that DC moment in here. The Max Fleischer DC animation, that was one of my favorite things coming up as a kid, and so I instantly recognized that style and time period. You'll recognize that with Betty Boop also, that whole thing. But that whole scene with the breakdown, I actually brought the script with Miss Minutes, who was voiced by Tara Strong, by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
Great job on that accent.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. It's funny, within the entire multiverse, they choose that southern down home twang accent to narrate the explanation of the whole purpose of the TVA, to regulate all space and time. It was hilarious to me.
I find that fascinating. Actually just a really quick point with the exactly what you're saying with the twang and picking that we've all been at the DMV. We've all been at actually maybe perhaps if you've ever been selected for jury duty, they have a video that basically gives you a sort of a overarching view of what's expected of you. These things are exactly that, and they're very particularly curated a lot of times, because when they take these whoever's doing the voiceover, it's to give you the sense of, in a weird way, and this is probably going into a completely different tangent, but they pick when people pick voices to do voiceovers like this, it's not random. They do pick people, and they do pick particular types of accents to communicate a certain way. If they want you to feel like you are getting communicated on the same level, they will pick certain accents and they will pick certain things. If this was a British accent that was actually people have an understanding, their brain automatically assumes that this person is smarter and that they're being talked down to. Whereas if you're talking to somebody with a Southern accent, and this is all, you can look this up in psychology, is that they think that the person receiving the information is getting it from someone a peer and not someone who's above them. If you go with any other accent, it sort of varies. And if you go actually, for example, for lack of a better way of putting it, with more slang and ebonics and stuff like that, people will associate that erroneously and unfortunately wrongly with being someone actually that's less educated, and the unfortunate thing is that's the reality we live in. But aside from that,
yes.
Sorry, all that to be said, Tara Strong is amazing, and I feel like that particular scene feels super familiar to everybody, because I think all of us have been to the DMV, and we see videos like that, and we know that they exist. That's it.
Yeah, honestly, it reminded me of the '60s. The stuff the animation you would see at the drive-in, stuff like that.
Yep.
Like,
Let's go out
don't
to
drive the movies, yeah, and and so it was so much fun watching it. I'm sitting there thinking I'm watching a Bewitched episode, or it felt like for a second.
Yes.
Actually, I think this is some technique that WandaVision kind of touched up on at one point. So it's a little nice callback to that show.
That's right. One of the intros. That's right. One of the intros was a very Bewitched animation style that was very much that cell animation.
Pretty much.
Right.
So yeah, they basically, it's basically timeless, that this is basically going to stay with Loki for a long time and everything.
I think that breaking this during this that little Miss Minute sequence, we get a lot of major keys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to just stay on it and dwell on it a little bit. Let's start with the fact that the reason why the triumvirate of time intervened is because there was a multiversal war. What? Really? Like, that's huge. And the fact that I mean, we
Yeah,
have Secret Wars and all of that stuff that's happened with the multiverse butting up against each other. But the fact that already happened, or yeah, I mean it's pretty epic. And then I guess I'm going to touch on this also from the standpoint that I mentioned earlier, saying that the TVA may be, they may be tyrants, is that anything can cause a variation in the sacred time stream, including clocking in late to work. Are you kidding me?
Yep.
Are you kidding me? You clock in late to work, and all of a sudden a door opens and you're whisked away, and you're facing temporal justice.
Yeah.
Wow. That,
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of those hold up, pause and rewind and laugh when it said, late to work. And, I like the little depiction of the guy kind of popping up and going up into that other timeline, but that was pretty funny. To me, yeah, it definitely illustrated that, okay, I understand that order has to be kept, but, at the same token, the natural order of things tends to be chaos eventually, right? So no matter what you do, it's going to happen. There's really nothing, rooms don't clean themselves, right? They naturally get disorderly. That's the natural state of things. Yes, you can clean it, but it will always revert to that point, no matter what you do. So it was very interesting to kind of to see that, and and also going back to something that's often talked about with Endgame in the crimping of the branches of the timeline. It really drives home the point where you say you have to deliver the Infinity Stone exactly to the moment they were taken. We see with their devices, with the TVA, with the hunters, hey, this branch is approaching, critical. So, that itself, the Captain America crimping the branches, by going to that exact moment, it shows how important that is. Certainly.
And it's funny that you say that, because it brings up something in Doctor Strange, and also obviously in Endgame. The TVA is being, they're deciding what is actually the right way, your right path, including a point that's brought up immediately at the beginning of the show, where Loki is accused of breaking the timeline, and he's just like, no, I'm not. It really was actually the Avengers. They're the ones jumping through time. All I did was I exploited a situation, but I didn't. It wasn't because by design I wanted to. I just wanted to get away. And they're like, no. The Avengers were supposed to do that. But why? Why were the Avengers supposed to do? Who's making that determination that should have been what the Avengers did? Brings up actually a very interesting argument that hopefully they do explore, because it still leaves a question unanswered. It leaves a question unanswered about a lot of different things in the time stream, specifically and I'll go back to Doctor Strange to an example, and even actually Endgame, is when the Ancient One is explaining how the branch theory, is explaining it to Dr. Banner. And in Doctor Strange, if you recall, she would peer into the future to see what her destiny was going to be, and she knew the moment she was going to die. She knew that even before, and that's when in her final moments, when she's talking to Doctor Strange, she's just like, I could always remember. I've always looked in, and I could never see past this point. The TVA thought that was acceptable, because if you think about it, you could see the future. You could try to make changes to that, but whether the Ancient One decided not to or did, and I would be inclined that she didn't decide. She did decide to make changes, because again, that was her role. Her role was to try to go ahead and actually guide to get to the point where then she can hand off the baton to Stephen Strange. So she influenced the timeline little by little. The TVA was nowhere to be found. So it'll be very interesting to see actually if they do explore that, like where the TVA, if they are doing this, if they are in fact the villains because of the fact that they are actually just arbitrarily saying this is acceptable, this is not acceptable.
Right.
And also the biggest thing that, to the end game thing is Steve Rogers does not come home. He never comes home until he just stays in the past and has this. He lives out his life with Peggy Carter.
He becomes a variant. He does. He goes actually into a different timeline.
And they've more or less said apparently they're planning to use Chris Evans as in some type of way for as Steve Rogers at some point. I'm wondering if that it will pretty much touch on what the heck he did to get the gems back and everything, and whether or not the TVA is like, So, I mean, yeah, the TVA feels like it's going to be very, very arbitrary, and it may come back and decide, hey, we got to fix you. Sorry.
And I'm wondering if actually the story arc in this is not only obviously Loki's story arc as being the protagonist, but also Mobius's story arc. Maybe him seeing the cracks in what the TVA does, because obviously, as an agent of the TVA, he fully believes and subscribes to what's going on.
Right.
He may not play by the rules all the time, and that's obvious by his decision to basically advocate for Loki to try to see if he can help in his investigation. But ultimately, he still believes in the system that's there. Well, what if that system is broken? What if that system actually is really just not, what he thinks it is?
Well, that's a good point, and I'm going to point out, what George says. He says he thinks that, Agent Mobius explains that, and he said Loki asked if there were arbiters of right and wrong, and if I remember correctly, he says try not to think of it as right and wrong. He doesn't necessarily say no, Horace, but he says try not to think about it as right and wrong. But then they kind of the subject kind of changes, right?
Yeah.
So, he may be for his disposition as this kind of hybrid camp counselor, detective, unflappable, very agreeable guy. What if he doesn't fully subscribe, because there seems to be a kind of rogue
yes,
he's definitely.
Especially since he's speaking to the judge, and he's doing something that's not standard protocol. He's got enough authority to where she's like, okay, well, it's on you if it goes wrong. There wasn't much of an argument there.
Right.
But at the same time, he may not be as on board as we think. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
How do we get this? How do we get this second Loki or rather first Loki, if you think about it, in the first place?
Is he first? That's the thing about the time.
Yeah.
How many have they had to eliminate? I will bring up actually something that I thought was curious, and this is something that it's completely off the wall. Okay, this is a segment of Mo's off the wall theory thing, whatever.
Let's hear.
So the other gentleman that was there in the line with him that didn't want to take a ticket, that basically got it.
Yeah.
It struck me that they picked an actor and they groomed the actor to have this long hair that's about the same length as Loki's, and just for lack of a better way of putting it, he's forgettable. But again, they could have picked any actor to look any particular way.
Right.
When I saw this, the first thing that struck me was, I wonder if this is a version of Loki. This is a version, not the version, but a variation of Loki to some degree, where he is a disagreeable, my father is the owner of this company, as he states it, and something like that. And this is a version that they eliminate. That was my first thought. I was just like, I wonder if that's another Loki. They don't mention him by name, but I wonder if that was another Loki. And I didn't look at the cast list, so for all I know, it may have been like suspect, whatever. But I thought that was funny that they did that. And somebody else pointed out, I saw a screen grab on the internet where it's like in the backdrop you could see somebody that looks like Agent Carter. That may have been they were arresting a Agent Carter variant. So it'll be funny to see. Actually, my understanding is that yes, we according to Kevin Feige, we'll see some variants of Loki, not just one. We may see a couple of variants out there.
That brings me to something else. Another thought that I had, which is cool that you pointed out, because Loki. I mean, well, sorry, that possible lesser variant of Loki, who's clearly talking down on everybody, right?
Mhm.
Personality wise, and then his father is in a high position like the All Father or Odin, right? That is pretty funny. But I was thinking also, with all of these variants, are all of them found guilty, right? If they all go by trial, by
it doesn't sound like
is a variant guilty?
it seems like they're just guilty just for breathing.
So what's the purpose of all of that, facade then? Is Loki right? Is it just an illusion? What's the purpose of doing that versus just disintegrating them or erasing them from the timeline
right as they walk in the door?
Right?
Yeah.
What is that all about?
I feel like this is a perfect example of, and this I think also is translated directly from the comic book, is that every system that's put in place, or most systems that are put in place, are eventually subject to a level of bureaucracy and red tape that just becomes part of the norm. And it gets so convoluted that at some point, actually, it's just people do it because that's the way it's always been done. And so I think that's what the TVA is. The TVA existed to an extent, when these three wise space lizards, as Loki calls them, basically said, well, this multiverse is way too disorganized. We're going to go ahead and actually put it all into place. And we're going to go ahead and set this path for every universe. And then we're going to go ahead and make sure that we have people that sort of run it. And then those people probably came into situations where they had to create policies for it. And those policies then in turn turned around and actually became the procedure. And the procedure then became and so everything birthed one thing after the other, from a very simple concept of, hey, we're just going to go ahead and make sure everything is in line where they're supposed to be. So that hierarchy in itself builds bureaucracy. So to your point, Leonard, yes, they could have probably just walked in and been like, oh, hey, done, reset the timeline, let's get out of here. But no, well, there was maybe one instance 500 million years ago where there was a variance and there was a case, and the case didn't really it wasn't really a variance, so it set a precedence, and the precedence was basically, so we have to build a policy now where basically we can't just judge it on its face. All of that stuff is part of the bureaucracy, and part of what I think will be explored in this show, and I hope will be explored, is dismantling that bureaucracy to say Loki, to some extent, is right. If you want to be the master of your own fate, you can't have somebody else dictate based on where you are in your life to say, no, this is the path you're going to take. This is the way it is. Right. And having Loki be that chaotic element, who else? I mean, again, the god of mischief is put into a regimented organization of order. What is that going to lead to?
Right. And then to complete the entire quote, because it is relevant, the idea that your little club decides the fate of millions of people across all existence at the behest of three space lizards. Yes, it's funny. It's absurd. And yes, everything you described, Mo, absurd. Like that, all of that is absurd.
It's not like he's wrong, though.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. We agree. I agree with Loki on that. It's ridiculous. And, when we talk about this tribunal of the space lizards, the three gods that decide all of this, they're three separate entities, and what happens when they disagree? Do they disagree? Are there versions of this extra temporal universe in which they have agreed and had to reset themselves? There's a lot. It's super deep there when you think about all that stuff.
That's deep.
If when people say that, oh snap, that guy in the middle looks like Kang. Are we going to see eventually the result of disagreement, where he's like, you know what, hold up, you guys, this is not the way what we intended. I'm the one in the middle. This is not the sacred timeline. You know what, if you're not going to do anything, let me go fix this myself. Fine, I'll do it myself. So we'll see. I mean, it's very interesting, the way this whole absurd circus is set up. As presented to Loki. We haven't touched on this yet. The scene in which Loki escapes after hearing about himself from Agent Mobius, and after he has a little bit of mischief, he goes back in there and he watches the rest of his life. Well, not necessarily his life, since he's a variant, but the version of him that's allowed by the sacred timeline to, continue out to its end. Very gripping as well. That's definitely the emotional sort of theme that we've been seeing throughout these Disney Plus shows, that unpacking, which Darius, you touched on briefly at the end result of that. But seeing his facial reactions to the different points of his life, just in those quick instances, the grief, and then the joy of seeing his brother, and then the shock to absurdity of seeing his own death, all of that within the span of minutes. I actually thought about this, which they say this has been a question that I've heard throughout my life. If you had a choice to know when and where you're going to expire, would you? Yeah. Right? And then this guy is actually watching his life. This is your life. He's watching his life, and he sees his death. Wow. Dude, deep.
Yeah, and actually, and it harkens back to something that happened actually in, like I said, going back to Doctor Strange and the Ancient One, is having that ability. Does that change your choices before? The Ancient One saw her death, and she knew it was a foregone conclusion. It wasn't a case where she was going to be able to change from it. She always ended up at that same place, looking at the sky, looking outward into the sky and seeing this lightning storm. She always ended up there. She knew, regardless of all of her choices that she made in between there, that's where she was going to end up. And she peered into it multiple times, probably over the course of years, where she probably was just like, well, I did something that actually in a previous timeline I wasn't supposed to do, and I changed it a little bit. Let me go look again and see if I end up the same way. Oh, I end up the same way. Okay, cool. Well, I changed this other thing here real quick. I'm going to go ahead and look again. So having that play out for Loki, and seeing what his choices reaped as well, and that it's interesting to be able to see almost in an out of body experience what your choices have wrought, like his choice that led to the death of Freya, his relationship with Thor, where Thor tells him, man, hey, I thought it was you and me. You were my ride or die. And, and he sees that. It's one thing to have that conversation and you're right there. It's another thing to see it from the outside and see your own reaction to it and say, holy crap, man, this guy has been my brother, and has been he's always, regardless of the shit that's happened, he's always thought, but he's my brother. Eventually he'll come back around and he'll do better and he'll make better decisions.
Right.
And then even at the end, ultimately, obviously they show his death and they show how he died. They don't really show you whether or not he sees it, how it plays out, and how he basically is going to betray Thanos. But you get the impression that he understands that him attacking Thanos was the result of his growth from the death of Freya to that point.
Right.
And so seeing all of that, gives them the perspective to say, shit, I have only been just the prop up for other people.
Right.
All of my machinations, everything that I've done have been, just, and I still ended up dead. It didn't matter that actually that I may have had all these grand schemes. And philosophically, that's sometimes the way it sort of is in life, is that, you can have all these grand schemes. Tomorrow comes and something happens and it didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene was pretty much the ultimate point of, it was like, okay, this show just got me.
Yeah.
This show completely got me. I think to your point about the Ancient One and everything, I think the reason that the TVA didn't come after her because she saw it, was like, okay, and didn't try to change it.
Right.
She never tried to change it. She just accepted her fate. I keep reading different iterations about magic and everything, and they're always like, it buys you very little other than knowing that you're going to die at some point, and that's it. You can try to change it, but it'll never happen. But yeah, I watched what happened to him. I literally saw Tom Hiddleston give a wonderful reaction to it, and it was just wonderful to seeing, like, okay, you have and will mess up on a grand scale, and it will hurt you. But there's a chance for, if you really want to do it, you can try to redeem yourself if you truly want, in some way, shape, or form. Right. After seeing what you are going to do, and so now and then it's like, okay, and he just literally just says, "All right, what do you want me to do? I can't do any better." It's like, well, we need you to help us with this other problem, and hey, maybe life can change a little bit better for you,
Well, it's funny because, when we look at WandaVision, when we look at, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we see that self-realization and that unpacking arc within the course of an entire series. Here we see it in one episode, so you do understand yourself is the quote. And he's quick. He is smart, right? He says, I am smart. Well, he is smart. He came to that realization quick. Or, is one of Loki's tricks.
You mean basically just talking and going along with the thing, and then,
exactly.
I mean, that seeing yourself, if you see yourself wind up dead, yeah, that made us go, yeah, maybe time to just chill.
Well, he's given, and not only that, but is also given a second chance, because again, he is a variant. He's not going back to that timeline. That timeline exists and is done. He's not going back to that. He's given the opportunity to. So, and I think what will happen more than likely in the show, and based on obviously the teasers that you see in the trailer, is now that he knows the scope of everything, he can strategize based on that scope. And maybe it's not necessarily like Owen Wilson said. He's like, why not the ruler of space? And at first, Loki's like, you're mocking me. You're basically, just trying to throw back in my face. And he's just like, no, but you have all this potential. Why not think bigger than that? Because in Loki's mind, he's thinking to himself, I am thinking big. What are you talking about? I'm thinking the world and Midgard and all the realms. And the truth is that it's not. It's a small little pond in this ocean, this multiversal ocean. And now that he knows that, now it's just like, well, wait a minute. Maybe actually then my machinations can be maybe it's to rule an entire reality. Maybe it's to rule multiple realities. So that actually, I think that's what's going to play out in the series, is that he's going to, he's always going to try to have one that he's a trickster. He's a trickster, and that's actually by default in his nature. I don't think that's going to be lost on this. It would be doing the character a disservice if you did, to basically just say tomorrow he's gone from anti-hero to completely pure altruistic hero. That doesn't fit that character. That's not him. They to keep true to the character, he's probably going to try some underhanded things, a couple of things here and there that he's going to basically try to go ahead and do. We didn't touch on one thing that I think actually was an annoyance for some people. It was a little bit of an annoyance, but not enough to not have me think the show was still, this first episode was awesome.
Yeah.
The DB Cooper scene.
That was funny.
It was funny, but the annoyance I had was actually, again, this is what happens when you speculate in your mind of what you think the show is going to be. You see this scene, you knew what it was going to happen, and you thought it was going to be one of his adventures during the show. Come to find out, it's a flashback, and you're just like, wait, I thought it was going to be like, there was going to be an episode where he was DB Cooper. Nope. It's just it's just these little couple of minutes in a flashback, in a flashback scene. And it's entertaining. It's great to see it actually, and to see it play out, but to see it as a flashback, you're like, oh man, I thought he was really going to be like, it was going to be like, oh, he's working with the Time Various and they have to do this sort of caper, and this is part of the caper. Nope. It's just a flashback.
Right. It's a random bet between brothers. So
yeah. What do they do with if it was a bet? What was I'm curious now as to what was the bet, because they don't use cash, let alone dollars, in Asgard. So what was the bet? Was the bet to see if he could get away with something, or was he getting the money to pay Thor back? And if he did, what use is cash to Thor?
I think he was just screwing around. He just wanted to prove that he could.
And it's just like, I can just see it. Oh yeah, you're the god of mischief. Okay, well, can you do this? And then
that's true.
I don't know. It's a weird relationship. We're talking,
To be fair, Thor loves snakes, and he saw a snake in the garden, and he went to go pick it up. And when he went to go pick it up, it was Loki, and Loki stabbed him real quick and ran away.
Right. This randomness, random stories.
Yeah.
But on that note, let's go ahead and just give a little bit of a review of this episode's show. So I'll start with you, Darius. Give your review, and I guess in the end, right, after your little quick summary, if you would assign it a letter grade, that would be great.
All right.
We're letters. Okay, letters.
Letters today.
Grade?
Yeah.
Letters. All right. I love the fact that we saw so much of the MCU building, basically verbally, but it basically tells you the nature of the MCU far beyond what we ever knew. And we mixed that with Loki's emotional spectrum, and we see him as the true human being or godling that he is. And we did so much effectively within 1 hour or just under an hour. I'm not sure how long, but the fact they actually made all of that so effective, and it's like, okay, you got to have a lot to build up on from that. I thought it was wonderful. I gave it an A. Seriously.
Cool. Mo?
I would say the same. Tom Hiddleston has made the character his own. Obviously, as somebody who's read the comic books like we have an understanding of what Loki is, and we probably in our mind's eye had an idea of who would have been the best actor to play that particular character. He would have been, in my mind, somebody more malevolent. An actor that portrays that malevolence. Tom Hiddleston works in that he actually works out of a certain amount of humanity. Even actually going back to Thor 1, I honestly thought he knocked it out of the park in Thor 1. I felt like that entire movie felt very Shakespearean. And granted,
thank you, Kenneth Branagh.
Kenneth Branagh, I would say exactly. That tells you right there. But you really feel for Loki's plight. He is a villain in that movie, but a villain by circumstance, not necessarily by choice. So to review this episode, is to say the highlights for me were obviously Tom Hiddleston, again, phenomenal performance. His Owen Wilson, who I'm not a big fan of overall, I think he's all right. I really, really liked him in this I really, really liked his character, and I really, really loved the dynamic he had with Tom Hiddleston. Their chemistry was phenomenal. They were just phenomenal together when they were in scenes together. And I love the idea of time travel and multiverses and variant things. I've always loved What If. What If has always been my favorite comic book series. And I realize that that's a different show. And when we get to that show, I'm going to be, but all that to be said, A+, fantastic episode. Except for the DB Cooper thing. I'm thinking it, actually, I'm going to bring it down to an A because the DB Cooper thing, I was just a little annoyed by it.
Of course, I agree wholeheartedly with what you guys have presented. Given the comedic elements from, the lip quiver, just little, there's a lot of chuckle moments in there. But the fact that once again, Marvel Studios has given us a just completely different look and feel and theme for a show that we didn't expect this before this year, really.
Yeah.
And it's just another ride that I'm excited to see where it goes, because honestly, we don't know. And I like that. It's not predictable on purpose, and it's great. So that alone earns it an A in my book. And so I'm just happy to be along for the ride. It's going to be fun.
On a side note, as a cosplayer, because obviously Bleeku is not here, and Cap is not here, I would say the one other takeaway from this show is, Minutemen, great cosplay.
Yeah.
If you can get a group of people to be Minutemen to walk around a town floor, and because of the fact that there's so many cosplayers that cosplay the same character, wouldn't it be great to just have a bunch of Minutemen grabbing up any Loki and being like, nope, you're not supposed to be here, and just walking him out of the con floor. That's, and then obviously again, there's also, for those Loki cosplayers, there's a super casual cosplay of Loki in a jumpsuit. All you need is a wig and a jumpsuit that says variant on the back, and that's it. You're good to go.
I agree. For anybody out there, watching, listening, make this happen. So many great conventions out there. We're gonna, specifically talk locally here. We got Dragon Con, we got MomoCon, and we got several other AWA. We need to see this, and we need to see pictures. So
exactly,
it's gonna be great.
Get on that, people. Get a group together. Get a group of 3 of you to do time variants, Minutemen, and walk around the con floor and randomly pick up. I'm sorry. Cosplay is not consent. Obviously, don't go ahead and do something you shouldn't. But all being said, if you agree to with the person, you can go ahead and actually and set it up as a skit to be like, you could just be walking around the con floor. You could tell the person in advance that you're going to do this, and then just snatch somebody up and be like, nope, you're not supposed to be here, and just walk away.
And perhaps even, set up the Loki variant photo shoot, and do it that way as well. So.
And to your point, Leonard, again, they did film some of it in the Marriott. So you know what? I see a lot of people getting pictures at the Marriott. Actually,
it's already going to happen. It's already going to happen.
Well, this episode did have an interesting elevator scene, and there are a lot of elevator stories out there.
Indeed.
All right, well, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for today. Once again, thank you to everyone who's tuned in live, and thank you for your comments and interaction. And thank you guys in advance for the rewatches and shares. And we look forward to seeing you in another 2 weeks when we cover episodes 2 and 3 of Marvel Studios Loki. And thank you guys, and we'll see you soon.
All right, take care, guys. Be safe.